Ethan was no ordinary boy. He lived in a sprawling mansion perched on the edge of a sparkling lake, surrounded by gardens so large they looked like small forests. Every morning, golden sunlight poured through the tall windows of his bedroom, reflecting off crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Outside, servants moved quietly along the paths, tending to fountains, trimming flowers, and polishing the family's fleet of luxury cars. Everything about Ethan's life seemed perfect, yet behind his bright eyes and gentle smile, something was terribly wrong. From the moment he could remember, Ethan had suffered from sudden, terrible headaches. They struck without warning, sometimes in the middle of a game, sometimes while reading his favorite comic books. Sometimes the pain was so sharp that he would clutch his head and whimper softly, unable to understand why his brain felt like it was on fire. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, were rich beyond imagination, but their wealth could not ease their son's suffering. Every specialist they consulted, every test they ran, seemed to leave more questions than answers. Doctors came from far and wide, some renowned around the world, carrying charts, machines, and strange instruments that beeped and hummed. They poked and prodded, took blood, examined his ears, nose, and eyes, yet no one could find a clear reason for the pain. Each visit ended with a polite smile and a shrug, and prescriptions for medicine that brought little relief. Even the most expensive medications and therapies seemed powerless against the mystery. It was as if Ethan carried a secret illness that refused to be discovered. Despite all this, Ethan's life was filled with luxuries that most children could only dream of. He had rooms filled with the latest toys, a library stacked with hundreds of books, and a playroom with video games and miniature racetracks. Every birthday was celebrated like a grand festival, with magicians, clowns, and fireworks that lit the night sky. His parents spared no expense to ensure he had everything a boy could wish for, and yet, no amount of wealth could bring him comfort from his headaches. Even his friends noticed the difference between Ethan and other children. While they ran through playgrounds or laughed freely at sleepovers, Ethan often had to sit quietly, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead, trying to survive another wave of pain. Sometimes he would hide in the quiet corners of the mansion, staring out at the gardens with a faraway look, wishing for relief that never came. He loved his parents deeply, but he could see the worry etched on their faces. The wealth around him could not mask the fear and helplessness in their eyes. It was during these quiet moments that Ethan began to notice small details of the world around him, things most children ignored. He would watch the way the sun reflected off the lake in the morning, or how the shadows of the trees moved slowly across the marble floors. He learned to appreciate the little things because the bigger world sometimes seemed too harsh. Pain had forced him to slow down, and in a strange way, it had made him more observant, more thoughtful, and surprisingly gentle for his age. Despite the luxury and beauty surrounding him, Ethan's parents were desperate for answers. They consulted neurologists, holistic healers, and even exotic specialists who claimed to have cured mysterious illnesses. None of it worked, and the boy continued to suffer. Sometimes Mrs. Whitmore would sit beside him at night, stroking his hair, whispering promises that he would get better, while tears ran silently down her cheeks. Money could buy anything, yet it could not buy peace for their child. Ethan, however, remained strong in his own quiet way. He never complained more than necessary, never allowed the pain to ruin his moments of joy entirely. When he played with his few close friends or read a good book, he tried to focus on the happiness those moments gave him. Even with his mysterious headaches, he found ways to smile, ways to laugh, and ways to enjoy life. It was as if he had learned early that life's struggles sometimes come even when everything else seems perfect. And so, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, beautiful gardens, luxurious toys, and doting parents, Ethan's life was a strange mixture of abundance and pain. His story began in a world that many would envy, yet behind the grand walls of the mansion, the truth was simple. He was just a boy who needed relief, a boy who, despite every comfort, still suffered silently, waiting for a solution that no amount of money could seem to provide. And little did anyone know, the answer to his suffering would come not from the doctors, the specialists, or the endless wealth of his family, but from the most unexpected and innocent source imaginable. Days passed, and Ethan's headaches grew stronger and stranger. Unlike a normal headache, these pains would start suddenly, as if a tiny hammer was striking inside his skull. Sometimes they came in the middle of breakfast, making him drop his spoon and close his eyes. Other times, they struck during playtime, forcing him to sit quietly while his friends ran around, shouting and laughing. No matter what he did, no matter how carefully he rested or avoided bright lights, the pain never seemed to disappear. His parents were desperate. They had tried everything the world could offer, from the finest neurologists in the country to expensive alternative therapies, from calming music sessions to exotic treatments from faraway countries, yet nothing worked. Each new attempt brought hope, which quickly turned to frustration when the pain returned. Stronger than before, doctors would examine him with complicated machines, check his reflexes, run MRI scans, and yet all tests came back normal. It was as if the pain had no cause, a ghost that no one could see. Ethan began to notice that the headaches were unpredictable. They didn't follow a pattern, making life feel like a constant gamble. Some days he would wake up feeling fine, only for the pain to hit suddenly in the middle of an afternoon nap. Other days he would brace himself, expecting a headache, but the day would pass peacefully. These surprises made him anxious. He started keeping a small notebook, trying to record when the headaches happened, hoping to find a clue. At school, he felt different from other children. Even though he was smart and kind, his classmates would sometimes stare at him, confused by his sudden pauses. Why isn't he playing? They would whisper. Unwillingly, Ethan became careful about showing his pain, hiding his distress so he wouldn't seem weak or different. He became quiet in class, sitting at the back, fidgeting with the corner of his notebook, while teachers tried to help but could not understand the real reason for his struggle. Home offered no full relief either. The mansion was quiet, almost too quiet, as servants tiptoed around, worried about Ethan's condition. His parents filled rooms with comfort, soft blankets, warm drinks, cozy chairs, but the headaches didn't care about luxury. Money could buy comfort, but it couldn't buy the one thing Ethan desperately needed: relief. Nights were the worst, when the silence made the pain louder. He would lie in his enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, willing the pounding in his head to stop. His mother often stayed beside him, holding his hand and whispering, "It's okay, we'll find out what's wrong." As the weeks passed, Ethan's life became a careful routine of avoidance. He learned to skip activities that might trigger pain, avoided bright sunlight, loud noises, and even strong smells. His world shrank slowly, though his parents tried to fill it with games, stories, and laughter. The frustration of being trapped in his own body grew, and Ethan began to feel a small, quiet loneliness. Even surrounded by servants, friends, and family, he felt like no one could truly understand what it was like to live with pain he couldn't explain. One evening, while Ethan sat quietly in the mansion's vast library, staring at a book he couldn't concentrate on, a sudden headache struck with unusual intensity. This one felt sharper, almost as if something was pressing from inside his nose. It was a new sensation, different from anything he had felt before. He instinctively pressed his finger to the bridge of his nose, and for the first time, the pain focused there, sharp, insistent, and confusing. He had no idea what it meant, but the change frightened him more than the usual headaches ever had. The family began to realize that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a normal headache at all. Doctors had overlooked something hidden and small. They started paying attention to the subtle signs: Ethan's slight flinching when someone brushed near his nose, his occasional sniffle when the pain was at its worst. Every tiny clue became important, every observation mattered. Yet even with this new focus, no one could figure out the truth. The mystery of Ethan's pain remained deep and puzzling, building a tension that seemed almost unbearable. And little did they know, the answer to this mystery, hidden in plain sight, would come not from a doctor, a machine, or a wealthy parent, but from someone small, innocent, and unnoticed, someone who would see what the world had missed, someone who would finally unlock the secret of Ethan's pain and change his life forever. Life inside the Whitmore mansion had grown tense. The once joyful halls, filled with the sound of laughter and music, now echoed softly with worry and unease. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of Ethan's suffering. From the marble staircase to the sunlit garden, everything looked beautiful, yet nothing could ease the boy's pain. His parents, despite all their wealth, felt helpless, walking through rooms filled with the finest things money could buy, yet powerless to soothe the one thing that mattered most: their son's aching head. Daily routines had changed entirely. Ethan could no longer enjoy the simple pleasures he once did. Breakfasts were eaten slowly, often interrupted by sudden flinches of pain. Playtime had been reduced to short, careful moments, and sometimes, Ethan refused to leave the quiet of his room entirely. Even the soft hum of the fountains outside seemed too loud when a headache began. His world had become a fragile place, balanced delicately between comfort and suffering. His parents tried everything they could think of to make him comfortable. Mrs. Whitmore would sit beside him for hours, gently stroking his hair or reading his favorite stories, hoping that distraction could pull him away from the pain. Mr. Whitmore, meanwhile, spent hours speaking with doctors, researching treatments, and even consulting alternative healers from across the globe. He spared no expense, traveling with Ethan to clinics in faraway cities, purchasing therapies that promised miraculous cures, yet each attempt ended with disappointment, leaving the boy's parents more anxious than before. The mansion staff also felt the tension. Their movements had become quiet, almost fearful of disturbing Ethan. They whispered among themselves about the boy's strange condition, sharing stories of how he would sometimes curl up in corners, pressing his hands to his forehead, silently crying from the pain. Even the housekeeper, who had worked in the family for decades, admitted she had never seen a child suffer like this. It was as if Ethan carried a secret burden, invisible to everyone but himself. Ethan's own emotions had grown complex. He loved his parents dearly, but he couldn't help feeling guilty for causing them worry. Sometimes he tried to hide his pain, smiling when visitors came, pretending everything was fine, yet the relief was temporary, and once the room emptied, the headaches returned, sharp and relentless. He longed to play outside like other children, to laugh without fear of a sudden strike. But those moments were rare and fleeting, leaving him frustrated and exhausted. Even school, once a place of excitement and learning, became a challenge. Teachers noticed his absence, friends whispered questions he could not answer. Why are you always in the nurse's office? Or, why don't you come out for recess? They didn't understand, and Ethan couldn't explain. Words failed him, and sometimes the simplest conversation became too much to handle. The boy who had once enjoyed learning now viewed the classroom as another place where pain could ambush him at any moment. Nights were the hardest. When the mansion was quiet and dark, the pain seemed to grow louder. Ethan would lie in his grand bed, staring at the ornate ceiling, clutching a cool cloth to his forehead, silently wishing for relief. His mother often sat nearby, whispering encouragements, her own voice trembling with worry. She tried to soothe him, to promise that everything would be okay. But even her love could not chase away the pounding in his head. Mr. Whitmore would check in from time to time, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder, feeling helpless as he watched the boy struggle. Despite all this, Ethan began to develop a quiet resilience. He learned to adapt to his limitations, finding small ways to enjoy moments when the pain eased. A simple book, a favorite toy, or even watching the sunlight dance across the polished floors brought him brief joy. He became observant of tiny details in the mansion, the flicker of light, the gentle movement of curtains, the subtle hum of the fountains. Things most people overlooked. Pain had forced him to notice, to pause, to appreciate. And in that way, it shaped a part of him that no wealth could create. And still, the mystery of his headaches loomed. Each day brought new uncertainty. Each evening left the family anxious, hoping that relief might come tomorrow. The mansion, filled with riches and luxury, had become a place of tension and quiet struggle, a place where love and worry coexisted, where every smile hid a shadow of concern, and where the search for the solution to Ethan's mysterious pain had begun to feel almost impossible. Little did the family know, the solution was closer than anyone could imagine, waiting quietly, unnoticed by the doctors, the specialists, and even by Ethan himself. A small, unexpected person would soon enter their lives, someone who would see what everyone else had missed, someone whose simple act of observation would change everything, and finally, turn the tides of Ethan's long struggle into a story of hope, relief, and unexpected kindness. It was a bright morning when Lily arrived at the Whitmore mansion, a small, curious girl with sparkling eyes and a carefree smile. She was the daughter of a neighbor, visiting for what seemed like an ordinary playdate, but to Ethan, this visit would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. Unlike the adults who hovered anxiously around him, constantly asking if he was okay, Lily approached him with the innocence only a child could possess. She didn't see a sick boy, she saw a friend, a playmate, someone to laugh and share secrets with. Ethan watched her cautiously, his curiosity mixed with hesitation. He had grown used to people worrying over him, hovering too close, touching too gently. Their concern, while loving, often made him feel fragile. almost like a glass ornament that might shatter with the slightest movement. But Lily was different. She moved freely, laughed loudly, and ignored the invisible rules that seemed to govern everyone else around him. Her energy was contagious, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt a spark of excitement, a sense that maybe, just maybe, he could forget the pain for a while. As the two children explored the mansion, running through hallways lined with portraits of stern ancestors and glimmering chandeliers, Lily noticed something unusual. She saw Ethan flinch as he touched the bridge of his nose, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it caught her attention. Unlike the doctors who had only looked at tests and charts, or the parents who worried too much, Lily's eyes were curious and patient. She was not looking for a diagnosis or a cure, she was simply observing, noticing what most adults ignored. "Why do you keep touching your nose?" she asked innocently, tilting her head. Ethan froze, surprised that someone had actually noticed. Most people didn't, or they didn't care enough to ask. He shrugged, trying to play it off, but Lily wasn't convinced. She sat down beside him on the soft carpet, leaning closer with that fearless curiosity only a child possesses. "Come on, tell me, there's nothing scary about it," she said gently. And for the first time in months, Ethan felt safe enough to think about the pain differently. The adults in the mansion were busy elsewhere, discussing appointments, treatments, and schedules, giving Ethan and Lily a rare moment of privacy. It was in that quiet, unsupervised space that something remarkable happened. Lily, without hesitation, reached toward Ethan's face, not roughly, not forcefully, but with a careful, determined curiosity. She inspected his nose, her small fingers exploring gently. And then she paused, her eyes widening slightly. "Wait," she whispered, "there's something in here." Ethan's heart raced, half in fear, half in hope. He had never felt anyone take notice like this, never had anyone dare to suggest that maybe the problem was not mysterious, that maybe it had a simple cause. Lily's intuition, untrained yet sharp, guided her, and before Ethan knew it, she had found something that had gone unnoticed by everyone else. A small object lodged in his nostril, harmless but hidden, pressing in a way that caused all the pain he had been feeling. Ethan gasped, and Lily's eyes sparkled with determination. She didn't scream or panic, she just said, "We need to get this out carefully." Her innocence gave her courage, and her courage gave Ethan a sense of relief he hadn't felt in months. He sat still, trusting her completely, something he had not done with any doctor or adult, and in that moment, a sense of hope filled the room, as if the long months of suffering were finally about to end. When the object was finally removed, Ethan felt an almost immediate change. The pressure, the pounding, the relentless headache, it all began to fade. His parents, alerted by the commotion, rushed in to see what had happened, their eyes wide with disbelief. Doctors had failed, money had failed, yet a small, fearless girl with nothing but curiosity and kindness had solved the mystery. From that day forward, Lily was no longer just a neighbor, she became a hero in Ethan's life, a small person with a big impact, showing that sometimes, the answers to our greatest problems come not from expertise, wealth, or power, but from observation, courage, and a willingness to see what others cannot. For Ethan, the pain was gone, but the lesson stayed, that even in a world of luxury and privilege, sometimes the most extraordinary help comes from the most unexpected source. The moment Lily touched Ethan's nose, everything seemed to slow down. The quiet of the mansion felt heavier, almost as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ethan sat frozen, unsure whether to feel fear or hope. He had lived for months with pain that no doctor could explain, that no medicine could soothe, and now, a small, determined girl had dared to look closer than anyone else had dared. Lily's fingers moved carefully, gentle yet confident, guided by curiosity rather than knowledge. She examined every inch, her eyes scanning with a focus that only a child's honesty can bring. Then she paused, her small hand hovering, her lips whispering, "There, I think I found it." Ethan's heart raced. He had never imagined that the cause of his suffering could be something so simple, so small, hidden in plain sight. Something that had gone unnoticed despite all the doctors, tests, and treatments. With steady hands, Lily reached inside, carefully retrieving a tiny object lodged deep in Ethan's nostril. It was harmless, yet perfectly positioned to cause all the terrible headaches he had endured for weeks. The object, though ordinary to anyone else, had been invisible to everyone trained to search for complex answers. Yet here, in the hands of an observant child, it was revealed, simple, undeniable, and life-changing. Ethan gasped, a mix of shock and relief flooding through him. The pressure that had haunted his head began to lift, and he could feel the pain melting away, almost instantly. It was as if a dark cloud that had been hanging over his life for months had finally dissipated. His parents, alerted by the sudden noise, rushed into the room, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation. They froze as they saw Lily holding the tiny object, their eyes wide with disbelief. Is that what's been causing his headaches?" Mrs. Whitmore whispered, her voice trembling. Her hand flew to her mouth as she tried to process the impossibility. Every expensive test, every specialist, every moment of worry and helplessness, they had all missed something so simple, something so small that it could fit entirely in a child's hand. It was unbelievable, yet undeniable, staring them in the face. Ethan reached up, touching his nose lightly, feeling the absence of the constant, sharp pain. It feels gone," he said softly, his voice full of wonder. His eyes met Lily's, filled with gratitude and awe. The little girl simply smiled, as if what she had done was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't boast, she didn't explain, she just offered kindness and observation, and that had been enough. The doctors, called in immediately after the discovery, examined Ethan once more, confirming that the object had indeed been the cause. Their professional faces, usually full of confidence and authority, now showed amazement. They admitted that the object had likely gone unnoticed because it was small, hidden, and unusual, something that no one had thought to check, yet in the hands of someone unafraid to look, the solution had been found. For the Whitmores, the relief was almost overwhelming. Years of worry, countless sleepless nights, and endless searching, all seemed to vanish in a single, extraordinary moment. The mansion, which had felt tense and heavy, now seemed lighter, filled with laughter, hugs, and tears of joy. Ethan hugged Lily tightly, thanking her in a way that words could barely express. His parents joined in, unable to stop themselves from celebrating the small hero who had solved the mystery that no one else could. That day, Ethan learned an important lesson, that sometimes, solutions don't come from money, knowledge, or power. They come from observation, courage, and a willingness to see what others cannot. And for Lily, it was a moment of quiet pride. Her innocence, curiosity, and determination had changed a life forever. A simple act, unnoticed by the world, had become the answer to months of suffering. From that moment forward, Ethan's headaches were gone, replaced with a newfound joy and energy. The mansion no longer felt like a place of worry, but a place of laughter, friendship, and hope. And though doctors and specialists could explain the medical side, the true miracle was the courage of a small girl who dared to notice something that everyone else had missed, showing that sometimes, the smallest person can make the biggest difference. As soon as the tiny object was removed from Ethan's nose, a strange stillness fell over the room. The mansion, which had often felt heavy with tension, seemed to exhale, as if it had been holding its breath for months. Ethan blinked rapidly, trying to process the sudden change. The sharp, relentless pain that had haunted him for weeks, no, months, was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. He lifted a hand to touch his forehead, half expecting the familiar pounding to return, but it didn't. There was only relief, pure and immediate, and a sense of lightness he had never felt before. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan could breathe without wincing. He stood slowly, testing the movement of his head and neck, smiling as the absence of pain seemed almost magical. Even small gestures, like turning his head or blinking, felt different, freer, easier. The mansion's hallways, which had once felt oppressive and silent, now seemed brighter, almost welcoming, as if reflecting the lightness in his own body. Mrs. Whitmore rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. Her hands trembled as she reached for his. "Ethan. Are you really okay?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Ethan nodded, a wide grin spreading across his face. I think it's gone, Mom," he said. His voice held a mixture of disbelief, relief, and joy, as if he was hearing the sound of happiness for the first time. Mr. Whitmore, equally stunned, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Feeling the warmth of a normal, pain-free moment, he squeezed gently, a silent acknowledgement that the impossible had finally happened. Even the mansion staff, who had watched Ethan suffer for weeks, shared in the quiet celebration. They smiled, whispered congratulations, and exchanged looks of relief. It was as if the air itself had shifted, lighter now, filled with the sound of soft laughter and whispered amazement. No one could quite believe that months of suffering had been ended by such a small, unexpected discovery. A tiny act of observation and courage had brought relief that all the wealth, technology, and expertise in the world could not provide. Ethan took tentative steps toward Lily, his heart full of gratitude. The little girl, small and unassuming, looked up at him, her face bright with curiosity and pride. "You did it," he said softly. "You really did it." Lily shrugged, as if it were no big deal, but Ethan could see the spark of accomplishment in her eyes. The months of pain, frustration, and helplessness melted away in that single, shared moment. Replaced by laughter and joy, the bond between them deepened instantly, forged in the fire of suffering and relief. The Whitmores embraced Lily, thanking her endlessly. Words seemed inadequate to express their gratitude. For all the doctors, machines, and money in the world, the answer had been simpler than anyone could imagine, found in the innocence, curiosity, and determination of a small child. It was a lesson that would stay with them forever. Sometimes the simplest, purest acts of observation and care can solve problems that seem impossible. Ethan ran his fingers through his hair, feeling lighter with every movement. He looked around the mansion with new eyes, seeing everything differently. The chandeliers sparkled more brightly, the marble floors gleamed in a way that made him want to run and spin, the fountains outside seemed to dance in celebration, and the sunlight streaming through the tall windows felt warmer, kinder, as if the world itself had joined in his relief. That night, the mansion was filled with laughter, stories, and joy. The quiet that had once weighed heavily over the Whitmore home was replaced with an energy that was almost magical. For Ethan, the experience was more than just relief from pain. It was a lesson in hope, trust, and the unexpected ways help can arrive, no matter how wealthy, how educated, or how prepared one might think they are. Sometimes life's solutions come from the most unlikely sources. And as Ethan finally fell asleep that night, free from the torment that had shadowed him for so long, he smiled, thinking of Lily, the small girl who had changed everything. The mansion, once silent with worry, now echoed with a quiet promise, that no matter the challenge, sometimes hope arrives in the smallest, most surprising forms, and relief, joy, and laughter are never too far behind. In the days that followed, the Whitmore mansion felt like a different place. The tension that had hung over every room for months had lifted, replaced by laughter, light, and an almost magical sense of calm. Ethan moved through the hallways with a new energy, running lightly on the marble floors, exploring rooms he had avoided for weeks because even the slightest movement sometimes brought pain. Now, each step was a reminder that relief had come, not from wealth, doctors, or medicines, but from a small, observant child. Ethan's parents were overjoyed. Their faces, once etched with worry and exhaustion, now shone with pride and gratitude. They watched as their son rediscovered the simple pleasures of childhood, swinging on the garden swings, racing toy cars along the polished floors, laughing freely without fear of the next headache. Every giggle, every small smile was a gift they had almost forgotten could exist, and the feeling of helplessness that had once dominated their lives began to fade. The family also began to reflect on how easily they had overlooked the obvious, how they had relied on experts, expensive tests, and complex solutions, yet the answer had been hiding in plain sight all along. It was a humbling lesson, one that made them appreciate the power of curiosity, observation, and innocence. They realized that sometimes, despite all the resources and knowledge in the world, the simplest perspectives, untrained, pure, and fearless, can uncover the truth in ways no one expects. Ethan and Lily's friendship grew stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a single, remarkable act of courage blossomed into a bond built on trust and admiration. Ethan looked at Lily with awe and gratitude, and Lily admired the strength Ethan had shown throughout his suffering. Together, they played, explored, and laughed, forming memories that would last a lifetime. The mansion, once a place of silent suffering, was now filled with the sounds of joy, echoes of small feet running, and voices shouting in happiness. The doctors, who had been baffled for months, also marveled at the story. Their expertise could explain the medical side, but they couldn't explain how months of careful testing had failed to find something so small and obvious. Their astonishment became a quiet lesson for them as well, a reminder that sometimes solutions are simpler than expected, and that listening, observing, and being open to unusual ideas can be as important as any medical procedure. Even the staff at the mansion noticed the change, their duties now carried out with smiles rather than worry. They spoke in hushed tones about the courage of the little girl who had solved the mystery, and the resilience of the boy who had endured so much. Every corner of the Whitmore estate seemed lighter, brighter, filled with warmth and optimism that had been missing for months. It was as if the entire house had exhaled a long-held breath, finally free from the weight of anxiety and suffering. Ethan himself began to understand the lesson in his own way. He realized that while wealth and comfort could provide many things, they could not solve every problem. The real solution sometimes came from the unlikeliest sources: a curious mind, a fearless heart, or a simple act of kindness. He began to pay more attention to the world around him, noticing the small details that once went unseen, appreciating life in ways he never had before. And as the days turned into weeks, the story of the little girl and the millionaire's son became more than just a memory. It became a quiet legend within the Whitmore family, a reminder of humility, hope, and the unexpected ways that help can arrive. No longer just a tale of suffering, it was a story of triumph, of friendship, and of the extraordinary power of observation and care. The Whitmores learned to cherish not only their wealth but the lessons life had given them, and Ethan, finally free from the relentless pain that had shadowed his life, grew stronger, happier, and wiser, knowing that sometimes, the smallest person can make the biggest difference, and that even in the most luxurious surroundings, the greatest miracles often come in the simplest, most unexpected forms. With Ethan's headaches gone and the mansion once again filled with laughter, life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Yet, for the Whitmore family, normal now carried a new meaning, a deeper appreciation for the small, often overlooked things in life, a reminder that wealth, power, and even knowledge, while useful, could never replace kindness, curiosity, or courage. The months of suffering had left their mark, not as a memory of pain, but as a lesson in humility, empathy, and the extraordinary impact of the smallest actions. Ethan spent his days rediscovering the joys of childhood, running through the gardens without fear, climbing trees, playing games with friends, and laughing freely in a way he hadn't allowed himself in months. Every day felt like a gift, a chance to experience life fully without the shadow of constant pain. But more than the relief, Ethan had gained a sense of wonder and respect for the world around him. He noticed the way sunlight danced on the water, the gentle hum of the fountains, the rustle of leaves in the garden, little details that had previously gone unseen. Lily remained a constant presence in his life, their bond deepened by the extraordinary moment that had changed everything. Together, they learned that friendship could be as powerful as any medicine, sometimes more so, for it carried understanding, courage, and love. The Whitmores watched with pride as Ethan and Lily played, realizing that this small child, through nothing more than curiosity and fearlessness, had taught them the most important lesson of all. Mr. Whitmore reflected on the months of worry, the endless consultations with doctors, the sleepless nights pacing the mansion halls. He realized that while his wealth had given him many tools, it could not replace careful observation, genuine attention, and the innocence that sometimes allowed people to see what experts could not. Mrs. Whitmore felt the same, cherishing Lily not just for the solution she had provided, but for the reminder that life's greatest gifts often come from unexpected sources. Even the doctors who had examined Ethan marveled at the story. It became a quiet legend among them, a reminder that human observation, no matter how simple or untrained, could sometimes succeed where the most advanced tools failed. The experience humbled them, showing that life could be unpredictable, and that solutions often arrived in forms that defied expectation. It reminded them to never underestimate the smallest, simplest, or most unexpected clues. Ethan, too, began to understand the deeper lessons in his own way. He realized that pain, while frightening and limiting, could also teach resilience, patience, and awareness. He learned to notice details, to appreciate kindness, and to value people for their actions rather than their titles, knowledge, or status. The world suddenly felt larger and more beautiful, filled with possibilities he had never truly appreciated before. The mansion, once a place of quiet suffering, now became a symbol of growth and hope. Every corner seemed to carry the story of what had happened, the whispers of relief, the laughter of a boy rediscovering life, the courage of a small girl who dared to notice what others could not. The Whitmores realized that life's challenges often hide lessons in disguise, and that solutions sometimes come in forms that are simple, pure, and unexpected. And so, the story of Ethan, the millionaire's son, and Lily, the little girl who changed his life, became more than just a tale of relief from pain. It became a story of humility, gratitude, friendship, and the extraordinary power of observation, kindness, and courage, a story that reminded everyone that no matter how rich, powerful, or knowledgeable you might be, the world can always surprise you with lessons from the smallest, most unexpected people. As Ethan drifted off to sleep each night, free from pain, he remembered Lily's courage. The mansion, once silent with anxiety, now echoed with promise, laughter, and joy, a quiet but powerful reminder that life's most remarkable changes often come from the simplest acts, and that sometimes, the smallest hands can hold the greatest power to heal, to teach, and to inspire.